Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the playing of our national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Londonderry School District Superintendent Nate Greenberg.
Good morning. Can we have another round of applause for our outstanding band? And also for the best high school music director in the country, Mr. Andy Susi. Good morning. I would like to welcome you to Londonderry High School. My name is Nate Greenberg, and I am the proud superintendent of Londonderry Public Schools. The Education Summit today is hosted by the 74 and sponsored by the American Federation of Children. We have presidential candidates visiting today, all of whom will lay out a vision for the country and what role education will play in that vision. No matter what the details of that vision will be, no matter what direction each candidate wants to face, I take comfort in knowing this is an extension of a singular belief. Education is a treasured, essential component of our society, and it is the cornerstone of future success and prosperity. That is how it has always been. Consider this quote from Thomas Jefferson in 1818. It is highly interesting to our country, and it is the duty of its functionaries to provide that every citizen in it should receive an education proportioned to the conditioned pursuits of his life. I would like to think that our district, its teachers, staff, administrators, school board, and especially its students and parents are working to ensure that every child has every opportunity to realize his or her dream. We are enormously proud of our accomplishments. Nationally, the Londonderry School District is ranked in the top 9% amongst best school districts in the country, and in the top 19% for student outcomes. The school district boasts the top 3% of places to teach, top 4% of safest schools, and in top 6 and 7% for facilities, extracurricular programs, and sports respectively. The teachers in our school district are ranked among the top 14% nationally. Proud accomplishments, certainly. But our focus is not rankings, our focus is our students. There are many traits that impress me about our students. However, two key traits rise to the top: perseverance and ownership. These traits have been developed and applied by our students thanks to a pre-K through 12 learning environment that integrates high expectations with a climate that models fairness and respect and is supported, implemented, and embraced by our students, parents, teachers, administrators, and school board. Perseverance and student ownership of learning enable our students to be true examples of our motto, giving wings to children's dreams. We see our work with a long view, not just 1 year at a time, which is why we work to provide a proper foundation of skill building at the elementary and middle schools. We work with our school board to ensure the results of our work are what parents expect and what businesses need for an educated and creative future. This is our mission. We do it with pride. We all understand what is at stake for our children, for our families, and for our society. So, I leave you with a final thought, again from Thomas Jefferson. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free in a state of civilization, it expects what never was and never will be. Thank you, and I hope you view today's summit as a marketplace where ideas and positions are espoused and evaluated by you, the voters and citizens. It's now my opportunity and pleasure to introduce Betsy DeVos. Betsy is the chairman of the American Federation of Children, a voice for educational choice, and the American Federation for Children Growth Fund. Active in Republican politics since college, Betsy was elected chairman of the Michigan Republican Party 4 times, serving as chairman nearly 6 years, from 1996 through 2005. Her political involvement has spanned more than 30 years and has included numerous leadership roles and campaigns, party organizations, and political action committees. She's active in a community. She currently serves on a number of national and local boards, including the Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, Our Prize, Mars Hill Bible Church, and Kids Hope USA. Currently, Betsy serves as chairman of the Winchrist Group, privately held multi-company operating group founded in 1989, and director of RDV Corporation, a family business office. Thank you all, and have an interesting and exciting day.
Good morning, and welcome to the first ever New Hampshire Education Summit. I want to thank Superintendent Greenberg and thank our host, the Londonderry High School, and Principal Jason Parent. Most of all, I want to thank our guests for taking the time to attend the 2015 New Hampshire Education Summit. Today, more than ever before, our students, our children, must prepare themselves with the best education possible for an increasingly competitive global economy. We're gathered today in a quality school. Londonderry High School is meeting the needs of its students as the results bear out. But the same can't be said about every high school. The fundamental issue is that our nation's education system was designed in the 1800s, imported from Prussia, and it has remained basically unchanged in nearly 200 years. It is a model of mass production, but children are not products to be mass produced. Every international study has consistently found the U.S. lagging behind the rest of the developed world. And even our Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, describes the U.S. education system as a picture of stagnation. And that's why we're here today, to fuel a national discussion about revolutionizing, not just reforming, education in our nation, changing the paradigm, transferring power from the system to parent and child, transforming the classroom from teacher-centric to student-centric, empowering parents to choose the best educational option for each of their sons and their daughters. We have the freedom and the power to choose in every other area of life. Think about going to buy a pair of blue jeans. Think about the number of options that you have and choices that you have in buying blue jeans. It makes no sense that we deny choices and options for education for all but the most affluent parents. I see a future where a closed education system is broken open, where dollars follow children rather than children following dollars. I see new and innovative schools that allow for parents to customize their child's learning experience. This isn't way off in the future. It's possible now, but only if we reimagine education, the way we've reimagined communication and technology and transportation and manufacturing and distribution and every other system that has evolved and innovated in recent years. I want to again thank you for coming, and I want to encourage you to get involved, get engaged, and join our education revolution. It now gives me great pleasure to recognize our partner in today's event, the 74 and Campbell Brown. Campbell is an award-winning journalist. She previously served as a White House correspondent for NBC and hosted her own primetime show on CNN. But most importantly, Campbell is a dedicated mother and a fearless champion for children nationwide. She is fiercely committed to improving education in our country. Please welcome my friend and today's host, Campbell Brown.
Welcome, everybody. Are you excited? I'm so excited. First, I just want to say thank you to Betsy DeVos. There is no greater champion for kids than Betsy. And to her and to our friends at the American Federation for Children, we could not have done this. None of this would be possible without them. So we are so appreciative. I just want to give them a round of applause before we start. So let me just talk very quickly about the format for today. We have 6 candidates. We have 45 minutes with each of them, one-on-one. It's going to be a long day, but it's going to be an awesome day. And for this first morning session, we are not going to take a break. We are going straight through from 9 a.m. to 12:15, unless I pass out. But we're going to try to go straight through. So let me say to you, if you need to take a break, by all means, go to the restroom, get a drink of water, whatever you need during our conversations. But also, we have a great group of volunteers from the Londonderry School students who are here helping us out today. Thank you. So they're running around, and if you need anything at all, just grab them. They'll be able to help you out. And I just want to say thank you for coming. The fact that you're here today demonstrates how much you care about this issue, and we really, really appreciate it. So with that, why don't we get started, and I'll invite out our first guest, Governor Jeb Bush.
Thank you, Campbell.
Great to have you.
Thank you.
I know.
Pretty cool.
This is my favorite part.
Yeah, exactly.
Governor Bush, it's great to have you here.
Thanks for the invite. Wouldn't have missed it.
I know you wouldn't have. A lot of people actually may not know that after you left office as governor, you started a foundation that focused solely on education. You got deeply steeped in the policy and have been working on a lot of these issues with other governors and other state leaders around the country.
Yep.
So being so steeped in it, why don't you start us off by defining the problem? Is K through 12 education in crisis in this country?
It is. It is in crisis based on outcomes. I mean, we measure inputs all the time in education because that's what the people in the system want us to do. Always need more money. It's always something, the kids coming in are ready to learn, and therefore we're not getting the outcomes we want. And it's frustrating for teachers, I know. It's frustrating for principals that want to have control over their schools. It's frustrating for everybody, but we should focus on outcomes. And if you focus on outcomes, we're in a heap of trouble. 1/3 of our kids are college and or career ready. 1/3. I mean, who in their right mind would consider that a successful outcome? That means that they can either start college without having to take remedial courses in reading or math, or that they can get a job of purpose and meaning. 1/3, and we spend a ton of dough. It's not about money. We spend more per student than any country in the world other than Belgium and Luxembourg and one other rounding error, literally. This is a crisis, and we're fighting over the wrong things, I think, in politics. Where typically education is about the economic interest of the adults rather than why is it that the God-given abilities of students aren't being fulfilled. And so if you start with how do you measure success by student achievement, then you'd have to come up with a whole new system, I think, that would make sure that more kids learn. And that's what the foundation that I started. Actually, I was involved in this in the early 1990s with a group of 3 people. We created Floridians for School Choice. And I mean, I've been all in on this subject for a long while because I do think that 13,000 government-run monopolies is not the best organizational model. Unionized, politicized, government-run monopolies is not the best leadership model, governance model for educating children. We should open it up. We should give parents more choices. It should be outcome-based. We should have high expectations for children. There's a role to create the standards and the, at the state level, and certainly accountability around these kids, but we should be free to innovate and try many different things, and right now our system doesn't yield that.
Talk about when you were governor. Obviously, expanding school choice was a big focus for you. But
Yeah.
talk about, you did a lot of things. You tried a lot of things in Florida and were successful at a lot of them. So talk about concrete examples of what you think worked.
Well, for starters, I really wanted to be the Mikey, remember the old Ovaltine ads? I wanted my state to be the, you like Ovaltine, huh? I wanted our state to be the state that was the most innovative state in K-12 education, and so we did try a lot of things, and many of them were quite successful, and I worked with the legislature to really break down the barriers. But when we started, just to remind everybody, the NAEP test, the Nation's Report Card, is really the one measurement of how you can measure state by state, 4th grade reading, 8th grade reading, and math. And we were 29th out of 31 states in 4th grade reading, 29th out of 31. We went in 10 years' time, by the way, to 6th out of 50 in reading, in 4th grade reading. So Mikey was doing a lot of different things, I can promise you that, but we were 50th in graduation rate. We couldn't whisper, thank God for your favorite state. We were at the bottom, and so what did we do? We created a system of accountability. Hold on, fasten your seatbelts here. We graded schools A, B, C, D, and F. Every mom and dad in the state of Florida knew that an F was lousy and an A was good. We rewarded schools that showed improvement. So any grade, any school that went from a C to a B, for example, would get $100 more per student, directly to the school. No cuts, no bureaucracy, no attachments, directly to the school. If the school was A, they would get $100 per student. If a school was F, their families, if they were twice F graded, their families in those schools would be given a voucher to go to a high-performing public school or to a private school of their choice. It turned the system upside down. There was a tension that needed to be there to make sure that there was rising student achievement. And in over a 3 or 4 year period, we saw dramatic gains in learning simply just by putting a transparent system of accountability around the schools. Then we said, well, once we created the accountability and more school choice, because we created along with this the first 2 statewide voucher programs, along with the one that was part of our accountability system, we created a tension, and then we said, how do we help the schools get better? And one of the things we did was we put reading coaches in every elementary school, starting with the Title I schools, and then going to every elementary school, and then going to every middle school. Because what we found was that teachers graduating from our schools of education never were really taught how to teach kids how to read. The most basic elemental point of learning, they couldn't do it. So we trained them, we taught them. It was empowering. Everybody in the school was focused on making sure that functionally illiterate kids had a chance. Then we added another feature, was ending social promotion in 3rd grade. This insidious policy, it's absolutely insidious to suggest that a functionally illiterate kid going from 3rd grade, it's okay to go to 4th. Really? Is it? When you're trying to learn science and math and you can't read? You don't think kids get frustrated? You don't think teachers get frustrated by a system that has no accountability, no expectations of kids? We had 34% of our kids were functionally illiterate when we did this. Had nothing happened, in my re-election year, Campbell, had nothing happened, a third of our 3rd graders would have been held back. A lot of moms and dads would have been really mad at a governor that suggested that we do this. We cut our functional literacy rate in half in 2 years' time. You can do this, but you've got to have real expectations that are far higher. And you know who's led the way in the Florida Renaissance? Low-income kids, #1 in the country on these NAEP tests. #1, African-American kids, greatest gains. Hispanic kids in Florida do 2 grade levels higher than their counterparts. Low-income Hispanic kids do better than the California average, where they have no expectations, where they just spend money and they blame the circumstances of life on whether kids can learn. I'm tired of this. This is what we have in our country, and it has to be state-driven. You have to change this and challenge all of the economic interests and say, can we give a little space for kids to be able to learn? Shouldn't that be the primary objective of this? And so our system, it was tumultuous. We took on the teachers union, and we fought. And they weren't very happy about this, but we won. And then teacher effectiveness issues. There's a lot of other things that go along with this to make sure that teachers are rewarded for a job well done. But this shouldn't be lifetime employment. We ought to be paying teachers a lot more when they get successful learning gains consistently. And incompetent teachers shouldn't be in the classroom. All the research suggests that. So, I mean, I got tar marks on my forehead. You can see the gashes here. I've got a lot of scars, but I'm most proud of that as it relates to the achievements that Florida have done. And now it's being emulated by all sorts of other states, for which I'm grateful as well.
That's what I was going to ask you. It's hard to do this. Why isn't it happening more quickly in more states? Clearly, the demand is there. You have more than 1 million people on charter school wait list in this country.
Yep.
People want more options. They're asking for vouchers. So, what are the barriers that are keeping this from spreading across the country?
I mean, to simplify this, monopolies don't go quietly into the night. I mean, they just don't. You have to challenge the system to transform it to the 21st century. And look, I'm not being critical of the people inside the system. They're trapped in it. Monopolies aren't the best governance model to assure that we have continuous improvement, that we're challenging things, that we embrace technology. There's so many tools that we have in our toolkit today, but there's always a resistance because, gosh, if you create too much tumult, we're going to have everybody's life's going to be inconvenienced. And look, there's union folks apparently somewhere protesting. I respect them for what they do. Their job isn't to get higher student achievement. Their job is to represent the economic interests of their employees. Fine, let's accept that for what it is. But shouldn't we have a system that is much more open and transparent, a more student-centered system? I mean, ultimately, we should have a system where there's huge rewards for learning gains, a year's worth of knowledge in a year's time, and a different consequence when that doesn't happen. And if you do that, then everything else will align the right way.
Are there any policies you tried to implement as governor that you wish you'd been able to but weren't able to?
Yeah, we implemented, I had a thing called Think Week. I stole it from Bill Gates. Bill Gates apparently takes 1 week vacations. That's what happens, when you're worth $50 billion, you don't take vacation. So he would send out to all of his employees, you have any ideas? I'm gonna go on vacation, I'm gonna read them. So he spent his 1 week taking in all incoming, and so I tried it. I took a week off, and my Think Week had all these ideas, and one of the ideas was create a degree for high school so that students can have a degree where you're aligning courses to meet the criteria, the credit criteria, but also make it interesting for them. And teachers will love it as well. That was the idea.
Choose sort of your major.
Like your major. So the major might be English, or it might be a foreign language, or it might be history. To kind of take away, the net result was, I thought it was a cool idea because it would take away the homogeneous nature of schools. You would have some schools, this was back in the CSI Miami days, so a lot of kids wanted to be forensic scientists. Well, you'd have your science courses aligned with that kind of learning. And teachers actually created 700 separate majors in this effort that took a year to kind of develop. And then they kicked me out the door. New guy came in, thought it was a dumb idea. I thought that was a cool idea because I think learning, particularly in high school, one of the great challenges is that kids get bored. They just don't, it's not as, elementary school you see pretty good progress across the country. In Florida we had huge gains. Middle school we've seen gains as well. High school is a real dilemma for our country. And so I think making it more alive, making it more relevant to them, tying their education to something that interests them was a good idea. And I hope some state does that, because I think that would be something that would be really relevant for aligning our interests so that kids, when they graduate, have some purpose in why it's important to learn. So they're not struggling when they get to college. A lot of kids could graduate in 4 years, but they change their majors because they haven't really thought through what they want to do when they grow up. And starting that process not in a way where you're running into a dead end, but just making it so that it's relevant. The learning, we found that teachers love the idea, and students seem to be encouraged by it as well.
You've been a big advocate for school choice, but I think it's fair to ask what kind of school choice. Milton Friedman advocated for universal choice for vouchers for anyone and everyone. Howard Fuller has argued for more of a social justice-based model that focuses on low-income families. What do you think is right?
Look, I'm all in. Whatever we can get is the way I look at it. This year, Brian Sandoval and the Nevada legislature passed the most dramatic reform in modern times, I believe. If it's implemented faithfully and correctly, it's going to be extraordinary. It's the Education Savings Account. It empowers families to pick their school of their choice, and it will be disruptive. And I think that's good. I think we need a little disruptive. We need to kind of break the china a little bit to assure that, the outcomes in Nevada are not good. The learning outcomes are horrible. Kids are going to struggle unless we create a new system. And the net result of a system where a parent has total choice of where to go is that every school is going to have to get better. They're going to lose their students. And when they lose their students, they lose their funding. When they lose their funding, they lose their jobs. To oversimplify this, that kind of tension is what we need. And so I do believe that states that focus first on low-income kids, it's fine. I'm totally for that as well. We have the largest corporate tax scholarship program in the country. 70,000 kids, low-income kids, go to private schools with Step Up for Children, and it's an extraordinary program with great results. That's a social justice, if you will, program. But ESAs, if they can be done, I'm for it. I'm for vouchers for kids, families with learning disabilities. In Florida, just to put it in perspective, and I know you have a program here in New Hampshire that is a mini-me version of the corporate tax scholarship program. I hope that expands dramatically. But in Florida, if your IEP, your individual education plan, which every parent has by federal law for a child with learning disabilities, if you're not satisfied with it, you can take the state and local dollars and go to a private school. And guess what? If you measure on the NAEP test, kids with learning disabilities, which state is the number one on the 4th grade reading test? Florida. This is this mythology that's built up. If you provide parents choices, that somehow public schools will lose out. The simple fact is they have to compete harder to make sure their parents are satisfied and their children are learning. And so we should expand every one of these things. It doesn't destroy public education. That is the myth that has been shattered by Florida. We have the most ambitious school choice programs, public and private. You go to New Orleans, where 70%, if not more, of the kids are in charter schools and now in private schools. The public schools are getting better. They have to get better or they close. This is America. Why wouldn't we think that we could apply the same principles, the common sense principles of continuous improvement that we embrace in everyday life? Why wouldn't it work in education as well?
Let's talk about Common Core, which has been a divisive
What's
issue.
that?
Your favorite subject.
Common Core?
It's been a divisive issue among Republicans, and I know that you have said that you believe all states should have high standards and should maintain high standards.
Yeah.
But how do you know that states have high standards if every state has a different standard?
Well, you know them. You know if every state has high standards because you have experts that know it, and if you assess to those standards faithfully, you know that high standards, it's not like pornography where you know it when you see it, but clearly low standards, you know it. That's what most states have had. Higher standards, along with real accountability and school choice and ending social promotion and teacher effectiveness plans and rewarding teachers for continuous improvement in student learning, all of that together yields rising student achievement. And the whole objective needs to be about rising student achievement to deal with this skills gap and the challenge that we face where a third of our kids, after we spend more per student than 3 countries, ends up not being college or career ready. So in my mind, the debate needs to be broader. It needs to be about real accountability, school choice, high standards. If people don't like Common Core, fine. Just make sure your standards are much higher than the ones you had before. We can't keep dumbing down standards. Another thing about standards that I learned through this process is that it's a collaborative effort of teachers and academics. And in most states, we have standards that teachers never get through during the school year because it's like a compromise. We end up diluting the number of standards. We have way too many standards. They're not high. They're not clear and transparent. And the net result is that we're untethered. The teachers don't actually know what they should be teaching. And so fewer, higher standards that require critical thinking skills is what we need. And this should not be federally driven. The federal government should have nothing to say with this. And if it's the commonality, to me, Campbell, the commonality is not as relevant as the highness of them.
So just let me ask you on that, on the
Because
commonality.
you can have bridges for determining. I mean, there's all sorts of ways to create bridges to compare state by state, which I think is important. You could use the NAEP test as a means by which to measure how states are doing. But states ought to drive this. There should be no federal involvement in curriculum content or standards, for sure, directly or indirectly. They should be, federal government, I think, needs to be a partner in reform. If states want to open up their systems, then the monies that flow from Washington need to be portable. We need to have Title I monies go for reform. We need IDEA monies going for reform. I think early childhood education monies, if states want to try something different, the federal government shouldn't create rules around that. They ought to be liberating that money and make sure that we create meaningful reforms.
So let's push on that a little bit. The
Yep.
federal government's role in public education versus the states, because there's some tension there, especially right now in Washington, where people are debating, Congress is debating, new federal education policy,
Yep.
the reauthorization of No Child Left Behind. That there are significant differences between the House bill and the Senate bill. They're in conference. If you were looking at what they're talking about, what is most important to you? What should we be fighting the hardest for?
I'd love to see this notion of portability of federal monies so that the federal government is a partner in reform rather than kind of a top-down provider of money with all sorts of strings attached.
Explain Title I portability.
Sure.
Well, not everybody's
Yeah, that's a
gonna know what it
nerdy
is.
concept.
Yes, it is nerdy.
Title I is the money that comes to schools that have a percentage of their kids that are qualified for free and reduced lunch. And it's a big slug of money. And it comes without any accountability attached to it. There's a lot of forms you have to fill out. In fact, in the state of Florida, we have maybe, as I recall, we had 300 employees working in the State Department of Education. 80% of those people were filling out forms to fulfill the requirements of 10% of the total budget per student that was funding. So the federal government funds about 10% of all spending, but 80% of the bureaucrats were there to fill out the requirements of the federal government. So number one, reverse that. We should be outcomes oriented, not input driven. That's the federal government's main problem across the regulatory sphere. And if states want to try something different, that Title I money that goes to schools that are where low-income kids reside, they ought to have that ability. In Florida, that might mean expanding the corporate tax scholarship program or expanding high-performing charter schools. Similarly, IDEA money, which is for kids with learning disabilities. The federal government promised to spend 100% of the money for those kids, and they're probably about 10% there as well. The same principle should apply. And that's what I think the federal government's biggest contribution would be a catalyst for meaningful reform. And the requirements for receiving this money ought to be outcomes, not inputs. We should try different things to make sure children learn. And the federal government should take a step back and say, all we want is to assure that children are learning. And it should be in your measurement tools, not ours. And I think that would be a much more dynamic system than the one we have today. Can I make one more thing? Because the reauthorization of the ESEA law, the K-12 federal law, is an important one. And I'd say the one thing, apart from this flexibility that neither bill has as dramatic as I'd like to see it, the one thing that I think is important is just a simple requirement of accountability, of tests, of a test to measure student learning. The one thing I know for a fact through hard work as governor of a state, through visiting 250 schools when I was a candidate, to being all in on this subject, is that you cannot, if you don't measure, you basically don't care. And we should make sure that there is at least some basis of measuring student progress. And both bills in the House and Senate has that requirement, and I think that's fair. The kind of test you use should be state-driven. The fact that we have too many tests, then make them fewer and make them relevant and make them better. But there should be a test to measure how a child is doing, and it should be based on learning gains. I mean, the whole focus here is a year's worth of knowledge in a year's time. We should be all in on that subject, because when we neglect that, the kids that are left behind are kids in poverty, African American kids, Hispanic kids, and then we blame it on the social circumstances of their life. And that is what a former president called the soft bigotry of low expectations. And we should reject that out of hand.
Do you see, aside from Title I money, a role for the federal government in similar to the way Race to the Top did, where you incentivize states to adopt certain policies? You know, if it's school choice, if it's vouchers, is that the way to get some states moving on some of these issues?
Look, I don't think Race to the Top has yielded rising student achievement. It's yielded some interesting reforms for states that were starting on the journey, and they got money for it. We haven't seen rising student achievement except in a handful of states. Where have we seen it? We've seen it in Florida because we had real accountability in school choice. We've seen it in Tennessee, huge gains. And I would say there it's because of school choice, some accountability, but also an all-in focus on teacher effectiveness tools, where teachers were given greater tools, because that's the single biggest driver of student learning is a capable teacher in a classroom that is well-trained and capable of delivering results. And so the federal government ought to be focused on the things that matter, and the things that matter ought to be state-driven. And yeah, I mean, we ought to provide incentives. I don't know if we need a competitive grant program that becomes highly bureaucratic rather than focusing on these more liberating aspects. And by the way, the Department of Education doesn't handle all of this, but I think early childhood education ought to be in this conversation as well. We have, I don't know how many scores of programs. I would take this is going to make news probably, so wherever you guys are. Stop looking at your BlackBerry and start listening now. Listen up. I would take, if a state wanted to, for example, Florida has 70% of its kids in 4-year-old literacy-based programs. 70%, more than any state. It's in our Constitution. We have and it's 80%, 85%, I think, private. It's privately driven. It's a lower cost alternative to the de Blasio. We'll hire union teachers, expand, make this into another thriving business for the bureaucracies and for the unions. Their cost is probably 3x more than ours. Well, if we wanted to expand that program, why shouldn't we be able to use any of the early childhood literacy programs that exist in the Department of Education or Head Start that isn't in there? I mean, I think some of this stuff ought to be bundled up, and their block grants ought to be given to expand these programs that are totally effective at a lower cost. One of the reasons why we have great learning gains, and where we're now a national leader, even though 58% of our kids are low-income kids, and we're a majority minority student population with about 57% of our kids, is because we have a focus starting with 4-year-olds, a literacy-based focus. Then we assess when they come the first week of school, as they're going to start, as they already just started in Florida and apparently start this week here in New Hampshire. And we determine what the learning deficiencies are. And then the kindergarten, first and second and third grade teachers work as a team to assure that by the end of third grade, these kids are going to go to fourth grade being able to read, to be able to learn math and science. That whole strategy should start at 4 years if states want to do it. And so Washington can be a partner for these reforms, and that's what I advocate. Instead of just saying, well, you got to get in line, you got to fill out this form, you got to do this. We don't care what the effect is. We're just going to spend the money and allow politicians to say, I'm for early childhood education. Well, great. I mean, that's wonderful. Pick little kids around. It's great for a picture. It's always good for a TV ad. But I want to make sure that kids are college ready by the end of 12th grade. And the way you assure that happens more often than not is assure that a third grader at the end of their third grade is ready to go to fourth grade literate. That's what we need. We need to stop, pretty pictures. No, we need to start dealing with harder policies to make this happen.
You mentioned how critical teachers are.
Yep.
There's no one more important in what we're talking about today. Let me go personal and name a teacher who had a big influence on you. And think about for a second, and tell us if you can, what did that teacher do that was so special that we could potentially translate into policy?
So I've met a ton of teachers, and I can tell those stories as well. In fact, I'll tell you two. I'll tell you One who was my teacher in residence because of what she did, and the other was my teacher in high school. This guy's name was Angel Rubio. He was from Spain. He was a Spanish teacher down the road at Andover, and Andover was like a perpetual headache for me. I mean, it was like so hard. I mean, it was really hard. I stayed back in 9th grade from a pretty good school in Houston, Texas, to go to this school, and I had like a 70 average my first trimester. It was hard. It was like the bar was so high. And this teacher said, okay, we're going to read the great works in Spanish in 10th grade. So I'm reading. I wasn't bilingual yet. I hadn't met my wife, so I wasn't all in on the subject matter yet. And we were reading Cervantes. We were reading Don Quixote. We were reading Unamuno, this Borges from Argentina, these classical works in Spanish, and I got to do it. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was so hard, it was impossible for me to imagine. And this teacher just said, you're going to do it. You have to do it. You can do it. He encouraged, he kind of threatened a little bit in his pleasing way. And it gave me a sense that high, lofty expectations really matter. And when I got to be governor and I saw the standards, for example, to put in real context, in Florida, many states in 1998, when I was running for governor in 1999, didn't have an exit test. So, look, just get a piece of paper. It's great. Don't worry. Kick you out the door. Doesn't matter if you're going to actually take college courses or you're prepared for it. Who cares? You're not going to get a job either. Don't worry about it. That's the life we lived in Florida. We had an 8th grade level high school graduation test, the HSCT. High School Comprehensive Test, 8th grade level. So I'm in a lab wandering around. I went to visit 250 schools as a candidate, and I'm in Seminole High School, and there's a kid practicing for the last time he can take this 8th grade level aptitude test to graduate from high school. The question he was struggling with is, a baseball game starts at 3, it ends at 4:30. How long is the game? Now just pause for a moment and think about the tragedy of not being able to answer that question in 12th grade. And immediately I said, we have to raise the expectations. I mean, we have an 11th grade now, I think, graduation test in Florida. We should have a 12th grade level graduation test, for crying out loud. I mean, this whole notion that you dumb things down and expect a good result, that kid is just going to be living a life, unless he's just overcomes great adversity. Imagine where he is right now. It just breaks my heart every time I think about it, and it's because we dumb it down so that everybody looks good. We have to stop doing that, and that's the lesson of Angel Rubio, is high expectations. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. It's up to the adults in the system to organize the system around them to assure that that is validated, that they are smart. Así, AP Spanish, mucho gusto. The other, can I give the other story real quick? Teacher in residence, Cheryl Clyott. I met her. She had an idea. She wanted my mother to come to kick off she's a math teacher. She wanted my mom to come to Sealy Elementary to launch she was the second lady, I guess they called it back then, right? To launch a campaign to get 1 million pennies for the school. And they were going to create this massive math project and writing project around how you go about getting 1 million pennies collected by all the whole school community. And so they launched it, and they got 1 million pennies. And I saw the incredible work, the creativity that goes into, well, actually kids were learning higher order math, far higher than what they would have learned, because it was something relevant to them. They thought it was cool, and they were proud of the fact that they were involved in it, and the community got involved, and they got many more mentors, which was one of our big initiatives. We got 200,000 mentors in our school. And the net result was that kids were alive to learn, and this teacher was just extraordinarily creative. So I asked her to be the teacher in residence, and she's one of my best friends, Cheryl Clyott. So there are spectacular teachers out there. She just retired this year. She went back into the classroom after we left.
You have, obviously, relationships with a lot of teachers. You've also battled with the teachers' union.
Yeah.
Do you believe, how would you think about this as president? Do you believe that the teachers' union is a partner, can be a partner in this? Or are you going to try to break the union?
Look, I'd love a day where Randy Weingarten and I could hold hands and sing Kumbaya. I've talked to her, and she's cordial, she's charming. but she's not going to change. So her job and the NEA leader is to represent the economic interest of the adults in the system, not all of whom are teachers, by the way. That's not in the case of Florida, I think teachers make maybe 50% of the people that the union represents. I tried when I was governor to work with the Florida's teachers unions on lots of things, to increase pay, to deal with the class size, to trade higher pay for this mandated constitutional amendment that we have lower class sizes that really didn't impact student learning. But it didn't work. It didn't work, and I realized, look, their job isn't, my passion was rising student achievement. They may want, teachers want that for sure. The union, though, is not there to talk about rising student achievement. That's not their job. They're there to collectively bargain, period, over and out. So anybody that challenges that notion is in their way. So I don't see, while Washington's not a place where you're going to have this dialogue take place, this is again a state-by-state effort. For example, in Florida, our foundation lobbied and the legislature passed. It was vetoed first, and then Rick Scott came in and we changed the system where all new teachers, there's no tenure anymore for all new teachers entering the teaching profession in Florida. We're moving to a performance-based system, which I think is the right way to go. That's done at the state level, and that's what we should be focusing on. The simple fact is a low-performing teacher will get, at best, a half a year's worth of knowledge in a year's time for a kid. A high-performing teacher will get a year and a half's worth of knowledge in a year's time with a child, like-kind kid. Well, if you lose the lottery and you have a bad teacher 2 years in a row, and your neighbor gets a great teacher, you end up with a learning gap that's hard to overcome just in 2 years' time. So this is an important subject. It really is locally implemented and state-driven, though, in terms of policy.
Hillary Clinton won the teachers union's endorsement, the AFT's
wow,
endorsement.
really quick.
Well, it's interesting.
Like, it took about a day for her announcement, and all of a sudden, bam, there it is.
But she
wonder
hadn't
why.
talked about, well, that's what I was going to ask you, because she hadn't actually talked about her views on K through 12 public education, and yet she won the endorsement. What do you think she said to the AFT to get their endorsement?
Don't worry about me. Worry about Jeb. I don't know. These are state-by-state issues. The federal government can be a partner in reform, and accountability really matters. The union does not want to get to a system where teachers are measured based on student learning. That's the one thing they really don't want. They don't want the reforms as well. I'll give you an example of a reform that would be commonplace if we didn't have 13,174 government-run monopolies as the governance model for the 73 million kids. And that would be competency-based learning, where students learn in their own way, at their own pace. When they master the material, they move on, where you could have kids graduating earlier than 12th grade because they're being pushed, they're not being held back, and where kids that are struggling aren't just passed along, that they master the material before they go on, and that you use digital learning, virtual learning, as a tool to be able to make that happen, or a flipped learning classroom environment. The unions hate this because, God forbid, if you actually had teachers that were partners with the classroom teacher to be able to make this happen. The teachers love it. The union hates it because they want to have a collective bargaining entity that is subservient to them, where they can negotiate as though it was 1950. The people that want rising student achievement would want to tear down all these barriers and create a new governance model that makes sure that children learn, and that we should have kids that are smart and motivated be able to learn at a faster rate. Why do we want to hold kids back when they could start college as sophomores? Thanks to Angel Rubio, by the way, and other teachers I was so privileged and blessed to go to this school. I started as a sophomore. I graduated in 2 years. You can do that if you reform higher education, but make sure that K-12 learning is much more student-centered. The unions would hate this. They hate anything that brings about more choices for parents and students. And that's the problem. And Hillary Clinton's embrace of them probably means that she's embracing this old, top-down driven system that isn't yielding the results that we need to assure that more and more of our students are college and or career ready.
I don't think you're going to tell us who your choices would be for Secretary of Education, but maybe. But name some people
I'm just saying.
Name some people that you listen to who influence your thinking on this.
Boy, I listen to a whole lot of people on education. I listen to researchers that do extraordinary work that really have real insights into why some kids are learning and some kids aren't. What are the systems that make it work? Mitch Daniels is a guy who we worked cooperatively together. Mitch told me, look, you've done all this stuff, I'm going to steal it and make it better. And he did. Indiana's success under his leadership is extraordinary. He continues to have really keen insights on how to go about doing this. He's now the university president and just a wonderful guy. There are a lot of people that I rely on to get advice. One of the people that I have been a partner in the reform movement, who I think is the most extraordinary person in terms of policy, is the executive director of the Foundation for Excellence in Education, Patricia Levesque. She was my education advisor, just brilliant person. There are a lot of governors that have practical experience about how to go about taking ideas, getting through the legislature, working with their systems to be able to execute on these bigger ideas. There's a lot of talent, and I think there will be a lot of people that could partner with me. Should I be privileged to be president, both inside and outside of the Department of Education.
I can't believe we have 5 minutes left, but we do.
I thought we were going for 3 hours.
But I want to end, I want to bring it back to children in the classroom, because we've talked a lot about policy and politics, and innovation, which you've touched on a little bit. But envision for us, if you can, what the classroom of the future looks like, because we've been educating our kids. We today educate our children, your grandchildren, the exact same way our grandparents were taught. So when does it change, and what does it look like when it changes?
I think it's more experiential, more hands-on, more exciting for kids, more relevant to things that are interesting to them, that connects them to their future, less rote, more creative. I think it is, there'll be many forms of this, but I can envision, if you tear down the barriers that the monopoly protect right now, a system where a child starts with a cohort of kids, 20 kids, all are unique, all are different, all have God-given abilities, some learn different ways, and that you use technology, you have a trained teacher that is harnessing the technology that is available today to make sure that every child reaches their maximum ability at the end of the experience of each year, and that it's competency-based, that you don't, if a kid can do it faster, fine. Create the system where they can move faster. This exists. I went to Stockholm, Sweden, and saw the knowledge schools. Joel Klein, actually, I think in New York you have a knowledge school. London has one as well. This should be the norm. If this is how you can get rising student achievement, a version of that is competency-based, where children learn at their own pace in their own way, where they're turned on by the learning experience because we've harnessed technology, something that they're digital natives, and where we move to a system where students can start in the classroom. They're with their age group, but they're mastering it. And then you end up getting students actually being the teachers of kids that are struggling. And it becomes a collaborative effort. This is what we need. The system we have today is still designed as though it was in the 1930s.
Is that the next phase of school choice?
It is, but then how do you collectively bargain under that arrangement? How do you, we must regulate the content, we must do this, we must do that. All of the system, is designed to this traditional classroom that existed in the earliest 20th century. So we need to open up the system and allow for innovation to take place. That would be my version. There may be other versions that are unique. I mean, why not allow total voucherization? As Nevada is moving in this direction, let the suppliers come up with the creative solutions, have high expectations and accountability, and get out of the way. Do you think America is lost it in terms of our ability to create and innovate? I mean, we're still the vanguard of creativity and innovation in this world. We just have to tear down the barriers to allow it to happen. Like we say in North Florida, we just need to let the big dog eat. And the big dog will eat, I promise you. You guys don't like the big dog eat analogy? You don't have the big dog eat analogy here in New Hampshire? Not even up in the North Country? Come on.
Last question. We have 2 minutes left. You, if elected, fast forward to November 2016, you win.
Sounds good so far.
I'm always sort of amazed at how some presidents so effectively use the bully pulpit and others don't. What if there's one or two things that there may not be federal policy that comes into play, but that you can really try to push with that bully pulpit, what would it be?
Well, I think we need to reform higher education as well, but that's another forum for another day. But I do think what I started on is really the national tragedy. And the bully pulpit needs to be used to create a sense that this is a crisis. We can't just deal with this in a tepid fashion. When a third of our kids, truly, only a third of our kids are college and or career ready. Think about it. Hundreds of thousands of kids can't get jobs because of the skills gap. Billions of dollars are spent in community colleges and public universities to deal with remediation. Really, basically, redoing high school math and reading because it wasn't done right the first time. These are huge challenges, and now you see what happens in the first anniversary of Ferguson. You see kids that appear aimless, that don't believe that the system works for them. They don't see how their lives has purpose and meaning. They're living in the here and now because they don't have the kind of education that would allow them to rise up. Babies being born in public hospitals today are likely to never have a job unless we change and alter the course that they're on. Imagine that. Because the first rung of the ladder is getting higher and higher and higher and higher because of automation, because of the rapid change of technology and innovation. That's the world we're in. We can't ignore it. And so, this has got to be the highest priority for the next president of the United States. It's not a federal program, but you don't think a president could mobilize the support of educators, community leaders, business people to say, enough of this nonsense? And that would be my mission. That's my pledge to everybody in this room. I'm on fire on this stuff because I believe this is the way you create a right-to-rise society more than any other thing. And for our country to succeed, we cannot just cast away huge numbers of kids without them having a chance to achieve earned success.
Governor Jeb Bush, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you all. Thanks. Thank you, Campbell. Have fun today.